Well, it's been a while since I've posted, and a lot has changed. Um, Welcome to another edition of Asia Migto Expat, or whatever this channel's called. Uh, Going to do the standard YouTube thing, like and subscribe. I don't have that many subscribers. I mean, this is just to sort of have fun, really. Um, but yeah, I should give you a bit of an update. COVID-19. Um, and protests in the city because we've now got the national security law, which has been um, brought in through the back door via the National People's Congress in China, where it's about to be. Um, so this is a short video just to sort of update you what's been going on in the city and the potential future of Hong Kong. Um, by way of introduction, I'm a long-term expat. I've been in Hong Kong for over 10 years, permanent resident of Hong Kong. So I think I'm in a position to kind of comment on the city and what's going on. As you know, we've been rocked by protests from June last year onwards. These protests have been highly disruptive to the city and basically have surrounded, or should I say, have focused rather on what was called the extradition bill. That wasn't withdrawn until sort of very late in the piece, and protests then gathered pace around what was called the Five Demands. You can look at my previous videos about that, uh, which basically were the main demands were the withdrawal of the bill, um, amnesty for protests, and inquiry into police brutality, and full uh, universal suffrage, which was promised in a vague way under the Basic Law, which is the mini constitution of Hong Kong. This didn't happen, and now we're in the present situation that we're in. In the interim, what we've had is COVID-19, which obviously came to Hong Kong via China. Um, this sort of kicked off in Hong Kong back in January. Um, the border with China wasn't shut until very late in the piece, or fairly late in the piece, I should say, due to actions taken by health workers going on strike. This led to the border being mostly shut, which it is. I've been stuck in Hong Kong since the beginning of February. Oh, that's not true. I actually managed to get out for a period of time. I've been stuck here since March. Um, I've been working from home for most of that time, going out of my brain, working from home like most other people here. Hong Kong, thankfully, has not been that badly affected. Largely, that's thanks to the locals here in Hong Kong who've taken a very strict and disciplined approach to wearing masks because of their previous experience with SARS and their general fear and lack of trust in the government. This has led to a very low death rate. I think we've only had 4 or 5 deaths in Hong Kong and very few new cases in the last couple of weeks. We had a period of, I think, 21 days with no new cases. So we had a period where gatherings of 4 or more people were outlawed. That's now been, or was relaxed to 8, and now I think we're going back to an even more relaxed state of affairs come this weekend. But let's see where that leads. Obviously, there's a great fear of a second wave here in Hong Kong. I think that's a realistic prospect. Unfortunately, like everywhere else in the world, until we come up with a vaccine. So that's the situation. And then, of course, we've had this further development with the national security law. Now, what can I say about that? Article 23 of the Basic Law provides for Hong Kong to legislate for what's called a national security or anti-sedition law. Originally, this was proposed way back in 2003. and was put forward to the domestic legislature called LegCo in 2003, and there were massive protests. About 500,000 people. It was withdrawn and not put forward. But I think as a result of the protests and just the general uh, fight that's going on between local demonstrators, the government, and Beijing and the West, uh, Beijing has decided to basically bring it in via the back door. What do I mean? The National People's Congress is going to amend the basic law, or the basic mini constitution of Hong Kong, which I think they can kind of do. Well, you know, because they're in power, and they can add provisions to what's called Article 23 under the Basic Law, and that will happen. Is it all that controversial that Hong Kong has an anti-sedition law? In many ways, no. Most countries or regions have anti-sedition laws. The difference is we're dealing here with an authoritarian regime and a city that really is in rebellion in large part against Beijing. Probably the best comparison is Macau, which only has about 500,000 people compared to Hong Kong's 7.2 million, but they're largely compliant. And they've had an anti-sedition law for many, many years under their own version of Article 23. But what does it mean practically for Hong Kong? Practically for Hong Kong, it means a lot. Here in Hong Kong, people cherish the rule of law and what's called one country, two systems, meaning Hong Kong is a semi-autonomous part of China, but self-governing, much like many former colonies or crown dependencies of the United Kingdom or other, former European countries that have small offshore jurisdictions they still control, like, Holland, or I should say the Netherlands, and some of its Dutch colonies, or United Kingdom, and some of the bits and pieces of what's left of the British Empire. Likewise in the Caribbean and a few other bits and pieces around the world. But what we're dealing with here is, a authoritarian regime which arguably has no law whatsoever when it comes to the system in China, which under Xi Jinping, who is the new emperor of China, he is now premier for life. Well, not premier, but he is the new head of various organs within the Communist Party for life, which is the first time since Mao that so much power has been concentrated in one individual. We've had a move back towards Maoism. And why is that? Great question. It's really not in the interests of people in China, in my view. Perhaps it's due to internal pressures on him and on the party to bring under heel Hong Kong, and then probably, I think, Taiwan. At least that's on the cards in my view. What does it practically mean for Hong Kong? Well, I think with the introduction of this law, it will mean that you'll have probably greater powers of arrest. The singing of the national anthem, or it being booed, will be probably outlawed. The burning of the flag and other things, that'll be gone. Anything that vaguely falls under whatever the party deems as anti-sedition or anti or independent will fall foul of this new law. Potentially security forces in Hong Kong will be present that weren't otherwise were present before. I think what we're looking at is the end of one country, two systems, the end of autonomy, about 30 years before the end of what was the deal with the British. Not good for Hong Kong.